Welcome to, hello everybody. Welcome to our second meeting for Creating the Future's community engagement planning effort.
There we go.
And if we want to just go quickly around and say who's in the room, I'm Hilda Gottlieb with Creating the Future.
Candace Green with Creating the Future.
I'm Dimitri Petropoulos with Creating the Future.
Somebody else.
I'm Gail Valerian in Guelph, Ontario, Canada.
Jane Garson in Toronto, Ontario, Canada.
Okay. Annette?
Annette Sandberg, I think somewhere outside of Des Moines, from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Sitting in a parking lot. And
Sitting in a parking lot.
Justin, are you audible?
I am.
I can be, just like Washington, D.C.
Okie doke. Well, you're sort of popping in and out audio, but if you got something to say, jump in and we'll try and decipher you. We're waiting on one or two others. To anybody that may be watching this meeting, we don't want you to just watch. We want you to be part of it, especially being as we're talking about community engagement. So you can tweet any of your thoughts, your questions, your ideas to the hashtag CTFuture. And we will be monitoring that and pulling your stuff in to the conversation. It was tremendously helpful having Stacey Ashton and Jane, you here last time via Twitter. And so we just want to make sure that anybody else that wants to get engaged.
And got a note from Stacey that she is working on signing in and she'll be here soon. So she is in the process of doing it.
Wonderful.
And hopefully we'll hear from Nancy here shortly.
Wonderful, wonderful. Good. All righty. So what's been awesome with you guys? What's been going on with you since last we saw each other and et cetera? Who's got something cool and groovy that's been going on with them?
I have something awesome. Yesterday they announced that my husband is International Music Guest of Honor at an event next March in San Francisco. He's going to fly. He's actually going to fly to do it. It's a
oh my God.
We travel together, and it'll be a wonderful event. We know a lot of the people that'll be at it.
Oh, honey, this is
wonderful.
Like a million different levels. This is good. I can see why you're giggly.
Yeah, when you have a non-flying spouse and you like to travel, this is a big change.
Who's got something cool and groovy that's been going on with them?
I have something awesome. Yesterday, my husband is International Music Guest of Honor at an event next March.
We're going to ask that you turn off the video in the blog post. Oh my God.
We travel together, and it'll be a wonderful event. We know a lot of the people that'll be at it.
Oh, honey, this is
wonderful.
Like a million different levels. This is good. I see why you're giggly.
Yeah, when you have a non-flying spouse and you like
if
to
you can hear
travel.
us, you need to turn off the video in the blog post. It's someplace in your browser.
Yesterday, my husband is. That's better.
Yay.
Well, she muted herself. So.
That's okay, and we will, and hopefully you will introduce yourself and pop on in. And I see Nancy is here, so welcome, Nancy.
Hi, Nancy.
Good to be here.
Good to have you here.
Yay! And whenever you're unmuted and your video is up and you're ready to say hello, Stacy, jump on in. Who else has something awesome? Who can top Jane's awesome?
I don't know if I can top Jane's awesome, but I had something awesome happen this week. Can you guys hear me okay?
Perfect.
Okay. Well, some of you know about the Knit the Bridge that happened in Pittsburgh last summer, which was actually an outreach project of Fiber Art International 2013. And last winter, I had an idea in the middle of the gloomy season in Pittsburgh. I thought, wow, wouldn't it be cool to like get a bunch of people together to make huge flowers and basically put up gardens in the parks in the wintertime just to delight people and add color. Well, and I wasn't thinking anything about it, but all of a sudden, Fiber Arts Guild invited me to submit a proposal for their Fiber Art International 2016 outreach project, and it was selected. So I just found out that this week, so that's pretty cool.
Wonderful. That is so cool. So this would be flowers where?
It would be basically we would create using right now we're looking maybe fishing nets or those bird nets that they put over trees. Some of you from the east might be familiar with that. We're going to basically have people use reused material, whether that's plastic or yarn or metal or whatever, and we're going to attach them to netting and create canopies in the parks that people can walk under, and also attach them to bus stops, and also create large freestanding flowers and bouquets. And we're going to do it in several parks, not just one, but bring communities together because, well, that's something that's close to my heart. And even though I don't consider myself an artist, except for in the multimedia realm, I do love bringing people together, especially to build something that adds delight for no reason other than to lift people up, especially during dreary times, So I'm really excited.
That's wonderful. I can't wait to see.
Did I answer?
Invite us all so we can come visit.
Absolutely. It's 2 years away, so you have plenty of time to plan.
Hey.
to get our tickets.
Yeah.
We could walk there probably.
In 2 years.
You started now.
Well, there's a goal. I'm not sure it would be my goal. I support you fully.
Gail and Nancy, what is going on with you guys in terms of life and awesomeness? And
I went to my first poetry slam on Saturday night, which was the most extraordinarily wonderful experience. One of our fellows, Anne McKay, and I went together, and Anne, being the wonderful person that she is, she got us into it. She got us into being judges. So we not only attended our first event, but we ended up judging at the first event, and it was amazing. Highly recommended activity. Imagine competitive poetry.
Yes.
Yeah, competitive spoken word.
I have a lot of friends that are in Minneapolis, huge in the poetry slam, like create the first poetry slam team at Hamline University and whatnot, and lightning bolts go through the room whenever these people perform, and it's such a cool atmosphere to be in. When you're judging, or even when you're just sitting there, it's so cool the way that you can take a written piece of paper and then turn it into like a little monologue for 30 seconds.
Yep.
wow.
And just got a tweet from Stacy that she is going to see if she can switch to her phone. So she's still with us. Yeah.
She's still working at it.
Still working on it.
Still working at it. Cool. Miss Nancy, what has been going on with you?
Work in school. Work in school. My awesome actually is I'm loving reading Hildy's blogs again. It is so cool. The sabbatical blogs have been just marvelous, and give me food for thought every time I read one. So that's my awesome.
Thank you. Somebody's reading it.
Me too.
I'm one of those lurkers.
Oh, I'm so glad.
I've heard of you guys.
Mm-hmm.
The lurkers.
Oh. And I see Stacy there.
Yes, Stacy is there.
Hey, Yay.
Hi, Stacy.
Hi. You can hear me, right?
We can indeed.
Yes.
We can see you.
Wonderful. And we are just all sort of sharing what has been awesome in our lives. So, Justin, are you there? Maybe.
Can I take 30 seconds to say hi to Stacy? And we actually met in person at a Volunteer Canada conference a few years ago. So it's nice to see you again.
Hi. Good to see you too.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, not to put you on the spot, Stacy, but what's been going on with your life that's cool, awesome, and fabulous?
Ooh, I just got back from seeing Sarah McLachlan in Portland at the Ed Steele beautiful winery hotel gorgeousness with my friend and her 3-year-old and 1-year-old. And we danced in the grass together. It was wonderful.
Oh, that sounds fabulous. That sounds fabulous. There's clearly a musical theme here. Gail just came back from Dave Matthews and Dane, and yeah, there's definitely a musical theme here. So, what's your musical awesome?
I was listening to the radio this morning. It was awesome. No,
playing air guitar.
Yes, I was driving, which is really great. What's interesting that happens with the awesomes is because we have these meetings so frequently that to new groups, you tend to use the same awesome. So I'm going to use the same awesome, which is to...
You may.
I am.
But not the rest of us. Some of us are inventive.
We are inventive. But I just like this awesome, so I'm going to use it again. And my awesome is Candace. Yes, I know. I figured we'd do that to you. Candace has been working here, I guess now 3 weeks, almost, and I have had the pleasure of working with Candace for a full week, and it's been wonderful. I was telling a friend yesterday, having the energy and the perspective of different people in the office, because we are a little insular, though we have all of you. But you know, it's different being in a hangout than it is working with someone on a daily basis. And I had posted something in our fellows listserv about all the qualities that she has, and I saw that Nancy chimed in with some extra qualities, which were which I had left out, and thank you, Nancy, for putting those in. But it is absolutely wonderful having you here, and you are my awesome. So even though I used it last time, I'm happy to use it again.
Yes, it is. I'll second that also.
Yeah.
Thanks. What you got?
Well, it's been fantastic being here. This has been my awesome too. You know, getting to work in a place where I come in every day and I'm excited, and it's always something different. And whether I'm being my lecture together or describing interviews or meetings or doing Google Hangouts, it's been really wonderful. So, and I'm slowly but surely getting used to the heat. So that's my awesome.
Yes.
Yeah. Candace is from Fargo, North Dakota. Yes. So.
Oh.
Yeah.
So the Des Moines, Midwest area.
You know, someone asked me, by the way, Candace, you speak Fargo, and I said that you can turn it on when you want to, and you can turn it off.
Yeah, I totally can. Yep. Can you speak Fargo? That's hilarious.
That's great. That's great. Well, my awesome is everything. I am slowly getting more and more into my head, which is where I need to be on sabbatical. Gail and I just came out of a meeting where I was 2 hours of the most inarticulate human being on the planet, and that's what it felt like. Man, that's what it felt like. I can't find words. I can't, because I am solidly, and where normally I go, oh God, I can't find words. I am reveling in the fact that that means that I'm there. I'm where I need to be. I'm in the headspace where I need to be, to just be. And I'm already having revelation after revelation and thought after process, and it's just, so it's a good thing. And I have two amazing people at my side who can, I don't have to worry about anything.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
That is awesome.
Indeed it is. Indeed it is. Well, good.
A video of Justin.
I'm back.
Oh, you are back. You are back. Good. So tell us what's awesome with you, darling.
My awesome is today is my first day being on total solar power in my house. Flip the switch.
Oh, awesome.
Nice.
So I'm now a green energy producer.
Well done.
That is cool.
So, but are you still on the grid, though?
I am still on the grid, and I actually push electricity out to the grid.
And make money out of selling it?
I don't make money. I make credit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Make the hydro bill disappear. This would be a good thing.
Yep.
So I'm assuming your power during the day and positive during the day and negative during the night in terms of production?
Yes. So, but I should be net negative draw on the fossil fuel world.
Wow.
Cool.
Wow.
When all said and done.
Congratulations.
Excellent.
And that's great for that part of the country. I mean, you know, out here, you know, it's like, yeah, right. You got solar panels. That's great. We've got 360 days of sunshine a year, but back there to be net, as you're suggesting, is really wonderful.
Yeah, that's what we're hoping for.
Yeah, it's fabulous.
Good for you.
Oh, wow. Cool. And I guess I do have one more awesome, is that I have always said that I don't like, when we were consulting, I intentionally did not do a lot of consulting here in town, in large part because this is where I live, and many of you know that I tend to be more introverted and I don't want to always have to be on. And I used to joke that I didn't have to, by not doing a lot of work here, I didn't have to worry that I was running out to Trader Joe's with no makeup on. And now with the new do, I can go wherever I want and nobody knows who the hell I am.
Right.
Awesome.
That is so awesome. Incognito all the time. I'm like right in their face and they don't know who the hell I am. That's nice.
You look like Hildy's sister.
Uh-huh.
There we go.
Wait a minute.
Younger sister.
Her much younger sister.
Do you know Hildy?
Do you know Jody?
Yeah, is she in Toronto? Do you know her?
Yeah. So that's my other awesome. Cool. Well, one of the things that I want to sort of state up front when it comes to engagement is that the time spent in catching up with each other is not only important for our own engagement, but really modeling that it is so critical for groups when they gather to take the time to reconnect with each other rather than just getting down to business. Because when it comes to engagement, you're engaging with humans, and when things fall apart, they fall apart because we're not attending to the human part of it. So I want to thank all of you guys for sharing who you are with me, because that's a really important part of this. So, yes.
I just want to remind people that if you are watching and not only want, but we encourage you to participate, let us know that you're watching via the hashtag CTFuture, and please participate.
Share your awesome. Share what's been going on with you. So, very, very cool. Alrighty, I did a summary of our last session where we had said that what success would look like in the broad strokes was people would be engaged in bringing out the best and the highest potential of themselves and those around them, that they would be empowered to basically their own potential for engaging their potential. And that it's not, we talked a lot last time about it's not engaging so that, it's not engaging so that somebody will give us money, it's not engaging so that somebody will do something, it's engaging because building an engaged world and a participatory world is the world that we want to live in. And we talked a lot about what it would take for people to be at their best and engaging with each other, and I summarized that in a blog post the other day, which I just need to share with you guys. After that meeting took 4 days for me to write that. Circles on my notes and arrows, and this is a condition that will be marked in green, and this will be purple, and yeah. So besides that, we talked a lot about the we together and the flattening of conversation rather than the top down. We talked a lot about understanding that there's different types of engagement with different people and different groups at different points along the continuum of potential. That there are some people for whom action is I'll read a blog post, or I will do what your blog post says about raising resources or getting a grant or whatever. And there's some people for whom taking action is I want to change everything about the way I engage with everybody. and that all of those are good, and that we want to make sure that when we're engaging in ways that meet people where they are along that spectrum. When they're ready to take action using, Carl talked a lot about the research that they had done on the pathways through participation, that people need linkages. And then we talked an awful lot about what it would take for people to feel confident to engage, and I loved that conversation, and I'm grateful to you, Stacy, for so much of your input into that. So that was a big piece. Where I'm feeling like, and I want to get a sense from you guys, where I'm feeling like we need to go, we've talked about the fact that 3 steps in engagement planning. Know what you want to accomplish. We talked in the big stroke of what we want to accomplish. Know who you want to engage, and then know how you want to engage them. What I'm feeling like I would like to do today is to start digging into those for whoms that we talked about. Who do we want to engage? And almost ask the what do we want to accomplish question again, related very specifically to them. So as we look at, for instance, and if you guys have that blog post in front of you, we can prioritize board members, fellows, potential fellows, participants in online communities, participants in meetings, recipients of our general newsletter, podcast listeners and guests, potential funding partners, potential demonstration partners. Who do we want to tackle first? And in that, ask again, what could engagement accomplish for them, for that group specifically, and for us, so that we've got a really solid grounding for each of them of what we want to accomplish. Does that sound like an approach? Mm-hmm. Any objections? Okay.
I have a quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
Can I ask a question really quickly? Okay, when I see the list of people you're trying to engage, it seems like a lot of them are fellows or people who already follow the Creating the Future agenda so far, and I'm using that term very loosely. But you also have podcast listeners and guests. I'm assuming you mean you're the one that you're doing, Hildy?
Yes,
or is there
a
podcast I'm not aware of?
Yes, ma'am. No, that is right now the only podcast that we do.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I was clear about that. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, what we had talked about in terms of proximity, not necessarily fellows, but in terms of proximity, was that the first level, the first plan for engagement is going to be for engaging what we affectionately call the first ripple. If you threw a stone into the pond, Creating the Future was the stone. Who's the people that we immediately touch? Gotcha. And that they can be the ones to engage others, but your engagement is way more powerful when you're even just talking about the people that you already know or that you're already touching their lives. So the podcast, for instance, there's people whose lives we're touching that we don't know who they are.
Mm-hmm. And if they're taking the time to listen to the podcast, then they are engaged on some level with what we're doing.
So we're touching them. We know that.
And that's why I was curious, because I think the first way I learned about you was through that podcast many, many years ago. Mm-hmm. And I was just searching. Yeah. So I think that is a potential place to get people interested.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So what that is also adding here to me is people who are already subscribed to our blogs. Mm-hmm. Because we have so many people who are already, whose lives are we touching? Mm-hmm. We've got who's subscribed to our newsletter, but people who are reading our blogs, people who are engaged beyond the online communities, who are engaged with us via Facebook, engaged with us via Twitter.
Hildy, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
I feel really badly that there's people I spent an amazing week with in Tucson and have lost touch with. There's a number of people who have stayed really engaged, and others who go in and out, and some who seem to have dropped off the map.
Right.
Should we treat them as a separate group and try and think up some way to get them back engaged?
Let's talk about
the most amazing weeks of their lives, but obviously then life intervened.
Let's talk about them when we talk about Creating the Future Fellows. because they are all fellows. Some of them are
Right.
more engaged than others, and I love that.
Because we certainly have a continuum of engagement within our own fellows.
Yeah.
Everything's a continuum.
Pretty incredible.
Just as an aside, it's always interesting to me the ones that you don't hear anything from for the longest period of time, and then they'll send a note, or they'll like on Facebook, or they'll do something that shows that they are there. I mean
they'll send a note on the listserv that shows that they're reading every single thing on the listserv. They just don't have time, or it's not in their nature to respond.
Yeah.
So we tend to ascribe levels of personal commitment and engagement based on what we can see in their behaviors, and that is so frequently incomplete.
Yeah. That's why I'm talking about a different strategy to reach out to. Are they satisfied with that level of engagement? Or is there something that would get them to get back into being?
I think, Jane, that when we get to the how, that's a really excellent question for each of these, along the continuum for each of these. So
I wanted to highlight them as a subgroup.
I think as Dimitri was sharing, there's a continuum and Nancy, a continuum of engagement in each of these, and we will be and the thought that actions need to address people along that continuum is perfect and wonderful. Thank you. When you guys look at the list of who, a list of people that we want to engage, is there anybody that you would like to talk about first? I've got one, but I don't want to completely push through.
Gail, you're muted.
My personal desire is that we talk about fellows. I think there's an incredible asset, resource, opportunity, body of knowledge, skill, passion that I've heard from fellows would like to be engaged more. But I'm not really that fussy yet about getting into the how.
No, we're not there yet. We're not there yet. Once we talk about the for whom, we're going to go back up to the what do we want to accomplish. So we're dipping down to go back up.
Speaking.
Go ahead.
Speaking as a hopefully soon-to-be fellow, I guess it makes sense to me to focus on them first and create a strong community for them, and that gets into the how, and the board, obviously, which is connected to that. That's just logically, first things first kind of a thing.
And the board is actually not necessarily all fellows.
Right.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Okay.
Yeah. So that's
actually mostly not fellows right now.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Trying to, and for me, obviously, in the space that I am working on right now in my sabbatical, like right now, potential funding partners is where I would like to play. So let's start with the fellows and go to funding partners, and after that go to board, and then see what time permits.
And I have one more just to add to the list, but it's not doesn't have to be at the top, which is the leaders, those who are in leadership of organizations that are touched by the Creating the Future framework, which plays through fellows, plays through others, but something about those organizations and the people in those organizations that are experiencing this, even though they might not know it.
Yeah, so in many cases, through our fellows, that's sort of the second ripple, whose lives are they touching, but it's a very clearly definable one in some cases. Cool. Yeah. Ooh, that's exciting. Okay, let's start with our fellows. When it comes to our fellows, what do we believe that deeper engagement will make possible? And let's, in both cases, in all cases, what I want to ask, first I want to ask for them, and then I want to ask for them. Because if engagement is about a relationship, then I want to talk about what that relationship can make possible for them, and what that can make possible for creating the future. Does that seem about right for you guys?
Mm-hmm.
Process-wise?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, all right. So what can our engagement, deeper relationship with our fellows make possible for our fellows?
Getting inspired all over again.
Reinforcing their skill set and building their confidence so that they are confident going out, using those skills with others.
I think building the community builds space for them to be able to use each other as resources.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking something about taking it past the honeymoon phase into kind of the reality of the day-to-day relationship, right? So you're off in Tucson, you're having this fabulous, amazing, spirit-changing honeymoon. Then you go home, and it's day-to-day, and it's hard, and not everybody is in the room going, yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
And how do you know, so...
Stacy hasn't even been here. That's the thing that I'm just loving, is that Stacy is not even a fellow, and yeah, you've been here.
Oh yeah, but that's how it has to be at a retreat like that, you know? But it's not like that when you get home.
No.
Never is.
So
one of the things about being with each other in that room is that we all start talking the same language. Yeah. And everywhere else we go, we have to explain what we're talking about. So there's an enormous comfort level in being able to use the shorthand that we know what we mean by highest potential.
Right.
And I find like when I find when I go back into the world, am I like talking twice?
No, you're good. You're good.
Okay, sorry. That one of the things that happens when I spend a lot of time thinking the creating the future way is I get frustrated when I hear people say things like, the world is just getting awfuler and awfuler, and then I have to, you know, calm down and figure out how I'm going to what I'm going to say in that moment. How do I confront that moment? Do I reframe that moment? Do I pout? Like, what do I do?
Do I do all of them?
Yeah. So we're a group you can also rant to about how the world doesn't understand us.
Well, you know, you don't want to get too much into ranting, right?
No, just when we come back here as a group.
That's not the positive thing to do, right? Like, it's not the compassionate thing to do. The reality is that this kind of thinking is new and different because it's not present in the world a lot, and that is the problem, is that, you know, so it's like, you know, you get sensitized to the idea that the words coming out of people's mouths when they talk about, you know, all politicians are stupid and evil, and the government is horrible, and you know, there are no solutions. It's hard to take that as just talk anymore, because you know it is having a real impact on people's brains and behavior that's not good for the world. So there's something around having some support in and even normalization of the hard work of, once you start seeing that, you don't unsee it.
So I would suggest then that what I'm hearing in this conversation that certainly resonates for me, but also I know in lots of our conversations in the last little while, has been that there's what it makes possible is an ongoing support network where we can maintain the practices or the being experience that we have had, learn how to share it with others in a way so that it's not about knowing better, but simply bringing to the conversation that we too experience the difficulty, and here's something that we've found that is compelling us to try something else.
Yeah. Were you reading my notepad, Gail? Because I had deepening practice, particularly in relationship to the being.
Yeah.
And because that's what's been coming up, is we've been having lots of discussions lately about how do you include who you want to be in relationship to your clients in your contract. Well, that's coming up in lots of different aspects. And Justin's a great one for bringing that up time and time again. How do I walk my talk in every part of my life? Well, having a community that you can share that with is just as important, if not more important, than being able to have a safe place to continue to practice skills. Because it really goes to the heart of who we are as individuals, as a community, what's important to us.
Yep.
That's a great point.
So you imagine it then as not just some network that happens to exist, whose goal are these things, but it is a supported network. That Creating the Future has a role to play in supporting that network.
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah.
Well, I also see it as part of closing of the feedback loop, so that what is being experienced by fellows in their work life and in their personal life becomes information and informs other fellows and informs Creating the Future in terms of how it evolves in the work that it's doing and the way that it's answering the question, whatever the question is.
I want to go back to, thank you for that, and then I'm also putting it in the Creating the Future pile as well. I want to go back to Annette noted building confidence, and as Stacy, you were suggesting, you want to rant, but you don't rant, and do we rant? And you talked a lot in our last conversation about how do we build confidence when we don't feel like we have confidence. And Justin has been a huge example of that on the listserv in terms of just trying to make that bridge. Okay, I got home, now what do I do? I think that there is a really big piece here for having a place where you can feel comfortable to say, I just tried this and it didn't work. This thing fell apart. Rebecca was talking a little bit about that last week in the listserv, saying, I've been working on this thing and I'm sensing this, but I'm not sure where to go, and I'm struggling with it. And sometimes just having a place where you can go, I don't know how to write that in text, but
how did you write that?
Breathe.
Yes.
Just.
Can I offer one thing? And sorry for the repetitiousness of this for some, but in conversation with one of the board members the other day, we were talking about a hub that he's part of that came together from a group of social enterprisers, and what keeps them together is the most interesting part of the story, because it's two values that they actively strive to cultivate and to stay aware of. And those two values are humility and vulnerability. And when he said that, I almost fell off my chair, because when I think of the values that we've created, our values, the statement of our values in action, which is right behind my, sitting or posted on the wall right in front of me, I would love those to be included in our values, because I think they really do speak, without ever having named them before, they do speak to what we talk about as the being, which is our willingness to render ourselves vulnerable to learning and admitting that we actually don't know most of the time what it is we're doing. It's an active exploration on a constant basis what it means to build community, what it means to be witness to people, what it means to be changing things starting from ourselves and then everything from there.
What do humility and vulnerability relate those to engaging with our fellows and what that makes possible for them?
I think a lot of it's creating the space. I mean, just as we were talking about a place where fellows can engage and can test and be revitalized, that we have to frame those expectations of humility and vulnerability, and that those are key values that describe. So it's not just getting people engaged. We're talking about how it is that we want them engaged.
Yep. It's also, I think, for most people, I can't speak for all, but I think for most, those are the two things that attract and help people to connect in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There we go. It makes connection much more possible.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And to build on that, and I hope I'm not stepping into the how, but I think one of the pieces of being vulnerable is recognizing that people sometimes feel vulnerable and engaging, especially if they're new in the learning curve as fellows, for example, and perhaps having resources they can review without having to ask. So they may even feel too vulnerable, because people sometimes get caught up in feeling stupid, and I should know that because I've been through the training. Mm-hmm. And perhaps having resources. I know for myself, I do a lot of, I've taught myself a lot of stuff using like lynda.com or Creative Live, which are portals specifically for creative professionals, videography, editing, and so on. And I can sit in a class and learn that, but you know what? I'm an adult learner, and sometimes I need repetition a lot before I get it. And if I were have to go to people and ask them every time I forget how to do this one little thing, I would feel more vulnerable than I would want to, and also I'd feel like I was wasting their time. And so if we have resources just for the basics that we could even point to, whether that's video or audio or written or a slideshow, I think that can help people bridge into their extreme vulnerability into a safer vulnerability. Because I'm personally pretty comfortable putting it out there, because I have learned that actually empowers people and it makes them feel safer to then open up back. But I've also learned the hard way that most people don't operate that way. And I've learned to have to be really humble in how I present that and go much more slowly than I usually do. So that's my thought.
It's and what it leads to, it's really wonderful. Thank you, Annette, because what it leads to is really a question of, we so frequently default to, when we talk about an ongoing support, we frequently talk about it as an ongoing support network. We consider it each other as the support. But what engaging with our fellows makes possible is providing support for bringing out the best in them in whatever ways they need support.
Right.
And so engaging with them and having them engaged with each other, it gives us an understanding of what do they need in order to, because we don't know. What do they need in order to move forward in supporting them in all ways?
And I think it's part of the continuum of approaches that Matt, you were talking about, well, an approach can be a slideshow, a video, an audio podcast, whatever. That's one approach that addresses people at one state, at one level. This is another approach, what we're doing right now, addresses people at a different level. So I think having that range and being open to the fact that people need different things at different times is touching upon that humility, that we're not smarter than anybody else, and also touching on the acknowledging and honoring the vulnerability, that it's okay to be that. It's okay to have that.
Yeah.
The other thing I like about this that's sort of coming to mind is then a little bit of a starfish philosophy that is about, and that maybe this is a bit of a condition, it's the what does it take to encourage people to connect with one another without feeling like they have to do it via the central space. What does it mean for them to create their own spaces to have discussion? And what would we be doing to encourage that?
So opportunity, one of the things that makes possible is opportunities for their own engagement without us.
Yeah.
Us being, you know,
the office.
The central hub. Right, the office. You know, how do you create those nodes that are self-engaged?
Or just encourage them.
Right, exactly. And so what engagement makes possible is opportunities for their own engagement.
Yeah.
So
in whatever ways
that has to be starred, circled, highlighted, emphasized in every way, because that's a fundamental condition for creating the future's mission.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, that is, and Gail prefaced it with the starfish. That really is. To Stacy and to Annette, I don't know if you're familiar with the book The Starfish and the Spider. It's one of the texts that we use in our immersion courses.
It's got blue ball right now.
Yeah, Dimitri told me about it, and I purchased it, but I got on the road, and reading on the road is just not that safe, apparently.
Audiobooks. You could just spend all of your time on the road sitting in a McDonald's parking lot.
Outside Des Moines.
That is one option. I just don't know how supportive that would be of my parents. So.
Yeah, no, definitely not working well. I'm not going to go into details about it because I wanted to explain it to both you and Stacy just dropped off for a second. So.
Okay.
I am sure. Is there anything else that we're seeing it will make possible? If our fellows are more engaged with us and each other, what will that make possible? And Justin, you got to accomplishing the mission.
I think it makes it easier for them to tell other people about creating the future, because we're talking about it all the time. If we're engaged, it becomes part of our internalized language, and we think to mention it to anybody that sounds like they have an interest in what we do. And by the way, I find the current tagline of "Being Questions Change the World" a really, really easy one to express to people. You run into so many people now who get it, that it matters what question you ask. And I said, you want to be part of a community of people who focus on asking very best questions to change the world, and that eyes light up.
Great. Yeah.
But if I had drifted off, I might not even know about that tagline. To staying engaged helps me explain it to other people. That's great, because I expand my community, and maybe it also helps creating the future too, because they go to the website and they become a blog subscriber or whatever.
Let's talk a little bit about what it. I see Stacy's back. Great. The whole starfish concept is a concept of distributed leadership, and so there's the difference between hierarchical top-down leadership and a flattened everybody is. There is no central leader. You want everybody to own everything, the most effective movements are distributed. Leadership is distributed. So it wasn't as if every decision in the South African freedom movement Nelson Mandela needed to see. It was because people were out doing stuff that he was a great figure, but that people were out doing stuff that wasn't connected. It was values driven and not top down driven. So. Just in terms of language. I want to drill down on a couple of these. What does it take to have a space where people feel comfortable feeling vulnerable and humble? What needs to be?
that I've noticed works really well with networks that have kind of a head, but then they want to encourage community engagement. So I was talking about Geek and Sundry, which is this big geeky YouTube channel that I love watching. And what the like kind of the face of that organization, that group, notices and comments on all of the times that they see community engagement. So they have a book club, and book clubs have spawned out. Like, they have a book club that you come on and you watch on YouTube. You watch the group of them talk about the book, but you've all read the book, and they have spawned local meetups in communities all across America and Australia and Britain and everywhere that meet and talk about the book before the YouTube, or they watch the YouTube together, or they do whatever they want. And all that the top of the hierarchy has to do is call out, right? Like, oh, I'm calling out to, you know, this group or that group. Once they started noticing that, more groups started exploding. Right? So all it took was just a noticing and going, that's cool, and then it's so there's something about validating that at the top, in the middle of the starfish. And that's the job of noticing. So that's the job of noticing how people in the outskirts of the Creating the Future movement are engaging. Noticing it and highlighting it from the central.
Cool. And I liked acknowledging and validating in there as well. Yeah. What else does it take for people to feel comfortable if we're going to create an environment where people feel comfortable, where people who might feel comfortable being vulnerable will feel comfortable being vulnerable, acknowledging, as you said, Annette, that regardless of what you do, some people may not. But what is it that creates a space that is as welcoming as possible for people to feel okay being vulnerable?
Well, I really liked her idea of having people have some kind of meetup, whether around a topic or a book or whatever, regionally, locally, because I know there are people in the Pittsburgh area that I would probably love who may be fellows or who may have similar interests. And if you get together, you slowly form relationships. And if you have central talking points, things you're discussing, like the values and whatever, I think vulnerability will come because the kind of people drawn to that often will be more willing to be vulnerable. And with that, I'm going to let you know I need to get on the road. I'm going to keep you going. I'm going to listen, but I'm not going to be watching because that would be unsafe.
No, I think so.
Okay. So.
Thanks, Annette.
Thank you, Annette.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, Annette,
I'll listen in.
Yeah, you'll be listening. Leave your video on so we can watch the clouds go by. That would be.
I will, and I'll situate. You know, it's Iowa and Nebraska. Okay, don't get your hopes up.
As Annette leaves, we're joined by another participant.
Kitty. Who is that?
Ashton is one of my two cats.
Hello, Ashton.
The younger one is not planning to ever become more than a kitten. His mother's still here. He never saw a reason to grow up. Lives with his mother. But he just came to get scritched while I was.
Yay.
Well, he thought my hands weren't busy doing anything else.
Yay for kitty cat. Cool. What else? Let's talk about an environment where people feel safe, where they feel, where they trust. What is that?
I keep coming back. Oh.
Go ahead, Nancy.
I keep coming back to the discussions we've had about creating thriving online communities and the issue of roles. So who is taking on the role of welcoming? Who is modeling how we want to be in this space? Who is taking the time to engage individually with people? All of those roles that we looked at equally apply here.
That active support. Yeah.
I feel like I'm having a bit of a mind meld with you today, Nancy.
I know, I saw your face.
In my experience, it is something that must be carefully designed and carefully managed with reflective leadership. But fundamentally, if you want to create that space, it has to be a space filled with humility and vulnerability, but also emotional maturity or emotional intelligence.
You know, Gail, that almost raises a question in my mind about stages of it.
So, say that again, Dimitri. I can't hear you because somebody's typing.
Yes, about the stages of this process, and by that I mean, if you know, we were talking about having meetups and having, you know, other sort of satellite engagements, that it would probably be helpful to have this sort of framework approach in people's minds when doing that, because if you're to get the most out of it. I mean, I'm not saying that just going out for beer isn't a great idea, or coffee, or whatever your pleasure is, but wow, if you could have this sort of overlay of what you're just talking about, and you're thinking about the acknowledging, the greeting, the vulnerability, all of those things in every context, that really creates very, very powerful, and I'm not looking at having a controlling hub or anything like that, but it is what makes distributed leadership or distributed organizations work. It's a sharing of values and approaches that allows leaders everywhere to be able to lead, not just because they call themselves something.
Right.
That's right. And you start with strengths. You start with the places where you're strongest in your ability to do that. Mm-hmm.
And I think, like, where I've seen that is like things like TED and TEDx, right, where you have a whole bunch of kind of values-based process around being able to use the TEDx brand, and that creates the kind of the space and the structure for the TEDx's to be kind of pulled together in the same to the same quality without the TED group having to come in and micromanage everything.
Yep. I'm also seeing in this that one of the things that it takes for people to feel comfortable being vulnerable is the modeling of being vulnerable and humble.
Yep.
That people will be in a space where others are being in that space. Individuals will go where systems lead them. Or so I've heard.
Now we're having a mind meld, Hildy, because that's what I was trying to say. Is when we've already got a blog post about not being experts, not being seen as experts. When those of us who've been through the training a couple of times are still willing to post, hey, this didn't really work out. Has anybody found a way to make this possible in creating the future values? We're asking for help in specific.
There's not been a lot of that. I'll be honest. There's not been a lot of that in the current, and I think in part we have not been as mindful as we could be, because one of the things I'm thinking about in terms of support is that it requires people. We have not mindfully designed this community. Where we've been able to, we've patched some stuff on. Clearly, it is designed with the values in mind. Clearly, it's designed with the vision in mind. Clearly, there are ground rules, albeit unspoken. But we have not been mindful in any of the design of this particular community. Certainly not to the extent that we have been mindful in the design of the MPCons community and the Facebook group.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. You couldn't possibly look at a listserv and say that it is the ultimate vehicle for building community.
Right.
Not the least of which reason is because using email is probably one of the worst ways to communicate, especially humility and vulnerability as values.
I didn't really think of this discussion as being specific to the listserv. I thought it included the Twitter chats and the Facebook and everything.
Yes.
So some parts of it are strong in some ways, and some parts of it are strong in other ways.
Yes.
Well,
It's all together in my mind.
the place where our fellows gather just as fellows is on the listserv. They are present in the Facebook group. They're very present in the NPCons chat. The place where they gather exclusively is in the listserv. Right
When
now.
when I think about, go ahead.
Go ahead, Annette.
What I was going to say, I'm thinking as you guys are talking about vulnerability, what makes people want to be vulnerable. I go back to the trainings that I used to do with adoptive families who are working with severely emotionally and behaviorally disturbed kids. And one of the barriers was that they would always say, when I role model a behavior, they say, well, that's easy for you because you're good at this. And so they didn't have the motivation to do the work necessary to be vulnerable because they thought it was something inherent in me. And so I would share the mistakes that I had made and why I had to learn how to do certain things differently and how frustrating it was and the tears involved and pointing out the steps so that they actually then could also believe that they could do it if they took the steps. And that got buy-in to them actually even trying to do whatever the technique was. And I learned that early on because otherwise they just saw me as this superwoman expert, which I was far from. The only reason I knew what I knew was because lots of blood, sweat, and tears helped me understand I have to have the skill if I'm going to be successful in working with this kind of kid or this kind of adult.
Yeah.
And so to me, a part of it is how do we make them see it's even worth it? Because a lot of people, who wants to be vulnerable? Like Brene, I'm sure many of you have watched Brene Brown's TEDx talk about vulnerability.
Yep.
It sucks. You know?
Yeah.
One thing I keep hearing, and maybe stories. You keep talking about all this stuff and how do you engage people and how you build trust so vulnerability can be a part of it. And I think a huge thing is stories, being able to break it down to, it's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that I've gone through. And so to have a discussion about stories like we kind of did with the NPCons last week, I think that's accessible. That's stories humanize things.
They do.
And we tend to tell a lot of good stories, but we don't tend to tell a lot of vulnerable stories. Nancy, you started to say something before.
Well, we've touched on it already as far as when you talk about having having space where people can be vulnerable. Not everybody is comfortable making themselves vulnerable on a listserv.
Right.
Or in a large arena. So how do you create space that allows people to engage at whatever level that they need to right now, which could be one-on-one, could be small group, 2 or 3 people. How do you create opportunities for people to engage in ways that are meaningful and allow them to build trust? That there are others who share and are willing to listen. Trust builds on trust. But not everybody has the same need to access small or large groups. So how do you create all those points of engagement?
Yep.
Or
there needs to be a range of options for how people engage.
Yeah. And what would it take as opposed to how?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and coming, looking at the, what there would need to be, and there would need to be a range of options. Options and opportunities.
one of the things that I've been looking at in the language in the sector has been, I would like to see us shift away from the language of success and shift towards the language of persistence, I think is maybe what I'm thinking.
Could you repeat what you said, Stacy? It broke up. You'd like to see a shift away from
the language of success to the language of persistence. So a lot of the sector I'm seeing, we want to look at success rates. So how many people did you get into a job, right, who, with barriers? And that, you can give a number of successes, but that's at the cost of persistence. Because in order to meet your deliverables, you have to work with the easiest place and get your numbers in, as opposed to working with people with the more barriers where you require persistence and failure in order to get to the end of the game. So how do we, and within the concept of persistence, there's a lot of vulnerability, there's a lot of getting stuck. So I'm wondering if there's something in that.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that touches on the whole idea of vulnerability again, because, as the saying goes, how to get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, 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 right? And that persistence. And when you do that, you're going to have days when you're not doing so well. And I think the key is then having reminders of, oh, that's right, but this is worth it. I need to try again. I'll get there. And it's normal. And it's okay to have to keep trying and coming back together. And saying, you know what, I tried this last week and I blew it. Anybody have any suggestions or resources? I think that's a really critical piece. And again, please forgive my trainer's brain, but that's my background. And so I'm always aware of how do we get people somewhere. It's not by saying you're going to be able to do X. That's part of it. What's the outcome? But the hard work is getting buy-in into all the hard work that goes into getting there, because people feel vulnerable, which nobody likes to feel vulnerable, and it takes a lot of practice and a lot of failure. Or maybe not a lot of failure. Some people are quicker than others, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. Justin, what are you thinking?
Well, excuse me.
And if you could just flip your camera on and off.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. I didn't want everybody to see my food.
Oh yeah, it's way different than the rest of our food.
Well, in my teeth and everything. Yeah. Well, I'm just listening, and I feel like we are. I think on the sort of readiness to engage components of the humility and vulnerability, I think that's pretty clear, given what we're asking people to do, to move into a space that is not necessarily comfortable. But I'm thinking about what we are sort of reimagining, which is the community of practice, which is fairly common. I think that a lot of people in our line of work are involved in, where they're bringing people together. And what's striking me is, as we think about the engagement, and we're specifically talking about fellows who obviously got to a point where they said they wanted to learn something more. Is there something at the front end of all of this, as we're thinking about it, which is where we build people up and prime them for being able to enter the space of vulnerability and humility, that where we can acknowledge this is practice. We call it practice intentionally, and I think it goes to the comment about persistence. I think one thing that I don't think we know is how fellows are using their connection to creating the future, and what they've learned and what they've done, and maybe there is something where we talked in the last session that it's finding people who want to learn together with us and apply what they learn to their own work. There's something about framing that I think gives permission for the humility and the vulnerability, but you have to frame that first. If that makes any sense.
No, it makes a lot of sense, and it helps segue also into what do we want to accomplish by engaging our fellows for creating the future. I just want to acknowledge that we get to watch the road with Annette. So Annette, say something so it's on the big screen.
Oh, yeah, I just decided that watching where I'm going is a lot more interesting than watching me because there's some beautiful clouds happening.
It is fabulous.
So I'm still, yeah. So that's all.
No, it's great.
So
it's
you know, Annette, what this is like is the live news broadcast. And now, from somewhere in Iowa, Annette.
Well, I'm hoping I'm not being.
Fabulous.
I'm not trying to be too distracting. I just thought it would be more interesting.
It's beautiful. No, it's just going to make us want to hear you talk more because every time you talk, that pops up on the big screen. So.
Oh dear.
As we are talking about this, so that what we're talking about is the blend. Yes, Gail.
Something that you just said, Hildy, reminded me of a really critical piece that we've talked about many times in many different ways, but I think we're just starting to have the first experiences of it, and that's probably because of your being on sabbatical, naming a chair for the board. So and that is one of the conditions of success is that people feel that they can be experimenting and practicing and mutually supported without you.
Mm-hmm.
That there's a sense that there's something that you do so well that no one else could possibly do. And I don't know how to describe it other than to say that it kind of reminds me of when we used to have those little phone calls after the immersion course, and so 6 people would come together and talk about how they've been using their tools or whatever it was they were doing, but they knew that they weren't alone, because even if you made a mistake somewhere along the line in this month, you knew you were going to be back with those people again, so that you could kind of explore a bit. This is what happened. Or you could listen to somebody else explore what it was that they had experienced, so that you could learn from their experience. But it had something to do with the strength that came from knowing that even you sometimes have those difficult experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but you are a fellow just like the rest of us.
Right. Right. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's really interesting. I was noting when Annette, before you were saying that's easy for you because you're good at this. Mm-hmm. That's clearly the Hildy thing. And I'll never forget Andrea.
Exactly.
Several years ago on the listserv saying something about that every time she would get in front of a group, she would say, oh shit, I don't know what I'm doing. And I said, I've been doing this for 15 years, and I still, every time I get in front of a group, say, oh shit, I don't know what I'm doing. And she said that was the most valuable thing that she could hear. I frequently talk in immersion about one of the most confidence-building things I had ever heard, and allowing me to step into vulnerability more, was Pema Chodron, who is a very renowned Buddhist, nun and Buddhist teacher. Talking about the fact that she's not an expert at this. She just practices a lot, and she's on the journey just like everybody else, and that she messes up. And I was like, I'm good with that. So the fact that we're all only human, and that we're all, I think that's really, it's a good reminder that, and it's sort of where I was coming from, Gail, when I was talking about the fact that we need ongoing modeling, and that the modeling of humility and vulnerability need to come from the people that people expect are not vulnerable. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so, you guys, Gail and Nancy, have been sort of announced to the group as the two of you have stepped onto the path that you want to teach the immersion course, and you're aggressively working towards that. That immediately puts you in a position very much like me of, oh, okay, you're the experts now. Bobby, you obviously know all this shit, and you know none of us do. And so I'm really feeling that very, very strongly, Gail, and I'm also feeling the power of what you said in terms of it not needing me, and you know how huge that is for me personally. That I need to know at any moment, and this year has been the first year because of you stepping into that position on the board, because of the work that the operations team is doing. Because of Candace is here, because of a lot of things that, you know, if I walk outside and I'm hit by a meteor, I'm good that this is going to keep going. It doesn't need me. Now, how do we reinforce that with the fellows? I think that is one of the things that you're right. I think one of the things that engages in the what does it take category is to some degree or another, and I don't know what this looks like, and I don't yet know what it takes, that the fellows own the fellows, that the community owns the community.
Yep.
Yep.
I wanted to reflect for a second on what humility and vulnerability does on a personal level, because I've been doing a lot of thinking about it lately. And when you mentioned it, Gail, the other day, it really kind of made me realize that what it does is if you're in a place where you express that, and sometimes it's easier to express it the more you express it. So you just become comfortable. What it does is it takes the pressure off, that, and especially in a consultant environment, that you know everything. And that is a lot of pressure, and it reminded me of the comment that Rebecca had made about how when she went through the last immersion course and made that shift and all of a sudden went back into her community, and instead of walking into an engagement that she had with a potential client and having spent the entire 2 days thinking of every possible scenario so she could come across as expert, she didn't walk in with that. And it's sort of a corollary. She didn't walk in as, you know, I'm vulnerable and whatever, but she walked in with I'm not necessarily the expert here. What I am is a guide. And that changes everything. And when you look at it in terms of your own personal self as someone who is a professional, that really creates a sense of relief, which all of a sudden takes all kinds of barriers away. Because all of that self-image of who you are and what you are.
Oh, good. Something came in the mail.
Ooh.
I'm also seeing, on the other hand, that there is a balance, and I'm not going to be very articulate about it, so I'm asking permission to babble a little bit. There is a balance where people need to see, and I will tell you from personal, being somebody who has fought being seen as the guru for 10 years now, and has said that over and over again. There's a balance between people needing to feel confident that that the frameworks work, that somebody's moving this thing forward, that in many cases that mommy is there. There's a balance in also seeing that sometimes mommy just has a really crappy day and needs to cry, and you know, I'm not sure where that balance is. That's why I'm not being very articulate about it. But I think that in terms of what does it take for people to feel vulnerable, they need to also feel that there is somebody, that there is strength and support, and that somebody knows what the hell they're doing. Because I think that that's a really big part of it. And you know, where is the line between Gail and Nancy and Hildy are vulnerable and exploring, and somebody knows what the hell they're doing.
Yep.
Yeah, and so I'm.
Yep, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So they need to feel confidence in others and confidence in themselves while seeing that others are also vulnerable. And sometimes they get the confidence in others by seeing that people are vulnerable and step into that vulnerability and overcome it. And sometimes they see, oh, wow, okay, that's right, I remember there's an answer. And that's a line that I navigate all the time, and sometimes okay, and sometimes not really okay. You know, and that's me stepping into my vulnerability right there to say I frequently don't know where that line is.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful.
But I do think that part of what it takes to engage community is the people who have is me. And I don't know what piece of me, and I don't know what that means for me, but I think that talking about the role of Hildy in this matters, and matters beyond this organization. If you want to truly build community, what is the role of the person that lit the match?
Isn't it that crazy dance that we saw in the...
But you know, I think I have the feeling that given the fact that we're headed in the direction of programs that are funded or functions that are funded in some way, in the not too distant future, we won't have to worry about that as much, because many of those batons will be handed off, and there will be people building and creating, and we'll watch them in their brilliance.
And we're beginning to see that.
And exactly.
You know, we're seeing, for instance, Justin, you're taking such a beautiful, perhaps not intentional, but feeling amazing leadership position in the listserv. People look to you for your exploration and your walking that line of confidence and vulnerability. And so maybe that's the answer. It is the passing of the baton. Maybe it is that first followers, the crazy dancing guy, more aggressively taking the baton.
So I keep being drawn. I mean, this is sort of a literary reference, but Paulo Freire's book Pedagogy of the Oppressed, where it basically speaks about movements, that movements are not created by the leaders. They're created by the followers. And so I think directly to what you're talking about, Hildy, is we have to talk about what are the conditions to make followers engaged in creating that community. It's you know, it is a polarity that's challenging to navigate, but I mean, again, to walk the walk, what are the conditions that make it so that it is about those who are being engaged? Because fundamentally, that's what we are saying here, that success is when they are coming to it for their practice and for their organizations and for their communities. And so, once again, the fractal component of it, we have to build that for ourselves if we're expecting those who are engaged to be building it out there in the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And Hildy, what I'm seeing is that you're more and more selectively getting involved. You don't have to be the first person to answer a question or the one that has to lead every event. You watch and see and pick your spots where maybe the people who already answered missed some key point you really want to reinforce. So you step in and do that. You don't. The more you hold back and see who else steps forward as a leader, who else takes each baton, the more capable people will be of doing that. Well, you go enjoy a sabbatical, except here you are.
Yeah, the only time I get involved now is when people repeatedly use the letter CTF. That's when you're going to see mommy come out.
Well, no, but you called this group together and you've structured this meeting, and I think that's appropriate because we're in early stages.
I'm being mindful of time. I can't believe how fast the time has gone already. It's 12:30, and And we've got till 1, or it's 3:30 and we've got till 4, or wherever the hell you guys are. We're in the middle of Iowa and I don't know what time it is. It's Central Time. Brain can only do so much.
Yeah.
I would also like to talk right now in terms of what we want to accomplish by engaging the fellows. What can deeply engaged fellows make possible for creating the future and our mission, our work and our mission?
They're catalysts. They're the ones. They are the ones. They are the ripples. They are the ones that turn it from facing inwards to creating the future to facing outwards to the community, and then usher it forward.
Yes, and what did you say? The
catalysts.
Oh, the catalysts. Okay.
Yeah, I agree, Justin. I think they're also the ones who, as critical masses form in areas, are your potential geographic hubs for in-person events. They're your core for getting those to happen.
Well, and if I may add, one of the things that struck me as I was doing the video interviews at Pano was the reaction of Lauren and Anna, who are the two younger participants in the session that you guys did for them. What an impact it had on their lives.
Wow.
And how I wonder how much effort is going into not just training boards and CEOs, etc., but actually engaging entire organizations, because in some ways they are even more open and they have their whole future ahead of themselves. And if they have a paradigm and a framework in which to step into the world, that can be so powerful. And watching them talk, and of course they were a little more confused and they weren't quite sure what to do next. And I actually thought, wow, they were the exact people who might benefit from a video to remind them of the basic principles or whatever, because they're the video generation, right? And to continue that forward, right. They can share that with their friends, and that's one way to engage them and their friends, because someday they're going to be the CEOs.
Right.
Because I have been editing the video.
Yeah, and I can't wait to see those videos. You know, it's occurring to me, it's one place that we didn't talk when we're talking about what engaging the fellows makes possible, is when what happened with Pano is they are the first organization that their entire staff went through the immersion course together. And so they are all fellows. And so their day-to-day language, we just had a meeting with Ann this morning, their day-to-day language is the language of what does success look like? Okay, we've just gone through complete different job descriptions and job titles in our organization. If James is now in X position, what does that make possible? What does 100% success look like? What will it take for him to be able to accomplish that? Are you crying again, Gail? She cried the last time we said this. Heard it twice, she's cried twice. This is a consistent message. It's just so immensely powerful to think, because so frequently, you know, you guys talked about before the bridge of what happens when you leave immersion and you go out into your world. They didn't have a world to go out into. They stepped into an organization where they were continuing their conversation.
They're reinforcing it with each other.
It was just an ongoing, you know, instead of day 5 of immersion, it was day 6 and day 7 and day 232. That's hugely powerful in terms of what it does for them, which could be geographic, it could be, but it's not in that day-to-day, but also what it does for furthering our mission. I mean, it's just incredible.
So I hear in that, and I really appreciate, Annette, you sharing that, because it raises the question of intentionality of the fellows in terms of not just practicing the practice, but conveying the practice. Of that, and that's one of the spaces I'm trying to navigate too, which is to say, my goal is not to just help you do a plan, it's actually for you to be able to do planning forever without me. But what I'm hearing is and I guess that is the question: is does engagement? Is there an expectation around engagement that is a piece of it too? That it's not just the demonstration; it's also the transfer.
See, and Justin, what comes to my mind as you're saying that is the continuum. That people are all at different stages, and some of them, and we need to provide for the ones that are at the stage to do that. Because even amongst the fellows who were at the point of wanting something more, I don't remember exactly how you phrased it, to become a fellow, but even within that, there's a range of,
how people are using it, what they're putting into use, and how they're putting it into use.
And for the ones that are ready, we need to be ready, or the framework needs to be in place, or the language, or the support, or the whatever, so that happens. Because I think that's really, really powerful.
What is speaking to me in terms of what can deeply engaged fellows make possible for both the work and the mission of creating the future is that it helps. We have 4 pillars to our mission. We have R&D, and that's the ongoing learning. We have demonstration. We have convening. And we have education. And education doesn't stop with immersion. It's just one more stop along the way. And so what deeply engaging with our fellows at every point along their own that continuum, it informs our education programs of what they need, and so that again becomes part of the programs. You're building the programs with them rather than for them, and making the assumption that learning is ongoing, and that it's not you hit immersion and then I guess I'll just become faculty and that's no it's like it's one more stop along the way, but there's a lot to learn and reinforce and whatever, and it'll help us build programs. What else can deeply engaged fellows make possible for the work and mission of the organization? What does it make possible for you guys in terms of the work and the mission of the organization?
Well, so far, wow, my head is just going in a million different directions, but it's occurring to me that one of the things that it makes possible for the organization is the potential to have assets at its disposal that that achieve the mission without needing funding, without needing the traditional relationships that sometimes can make it difficult to achieve the mission.
Give me more about those relationships that may make it difficult to achieve the mission.
Well, when you think about every zillion organizations who say we can't get it done because we don't have the money, it removes the need for scarcity thinking, because we have assets and resources available as an organization that in the short term further the mission, but in the long term render the organization itself unnecessary. Think of it. Think of what we did in Pennsylvania. Whole communities are taking. Oh, it freaks me out looking at you driving on the.
I'm
Watch
sorry.
that truck.
Turn it around.
You got 700 backseat drivers now.
All I can think of is, oh my God, I hope she doesn't hit anybody.
She's not watching the road just like we are, so she's good.
Imagine the natural consequences.
Yes, it's beautiful. Mm-hmm. Go ahead. The natural consequences
of teaching. So we move from organization to organization to community level, or state level, or beyond, regional level. God knows it would be cool to do it at the national level, where people just know how to do this. I'm just thinking about what Justin said. I don't do a plan for you. I teach you how to create your own plan. I don't change your community for you. I teach you how to do it yourself. That renders the organization unnecessary at a certain point because so many people now are able to do this work themselves. Yeah. But there is a short-term need for engaging people in the work of creating the future, as opposed to hiring it out to people on staff.
I don't know if this analogy applies because it's a technology analogy, and I will ask everyone to tell me what you think. In the world of Linux, where the open source world, though there is not a controlling entity that says I'm the boss and follow what we're saying. I mean, people can pretty much work. There is still a sort of like a standards bearer that and the way I would think of it is sort of like a values tester, because as things evolve, are they still in the realm of the values? So in the case of Linux, is it still following the basic precepts that were technical precepts that were established? So I don't know, and I'm sort of thinking about what you were saying, Gail, in terms of, well, eventually there's no organization there. And I agree with you from the perspective of what this organization is now, but I could see something evolving that maintains the values somehow, or is a forum for discussion of the values. I mean, not the boss of the values, but some place where they can be revisited and people can be renewed with them on an ongoing basis. So if I work backwards from that, do we need that kind of thing now in some way in thinking about it? So.
We need somebody to be prepared for it, that's for sure.
Well, and in many cases, that's really what we anticipate the board being.
Right.
The board as the keeper of the vision and the values. During the time where there is an organization, I'm sort of fast forwarding, thinking about, okay, what does everything that we talked about today, what this makes possible for our fellows, and then what it makes possible for creating the future, is an eventuality where there are no fellows, where this is just how everybody bees in their life and in their work. That for right now, the fellows are the first followers, but my goal is that in 10 years, we don't need immersion courses. In 10 years, there's enough understanding of frameworks and questions and process that we don't need immersion courses. That you may wind up taking webinars that 9 million people do online because, here's how to ask a question, because it's so ubiquitous that 9 million people are taking it up. Go, Gail.
Hildy, describe the book that you're reading right now, because this is absolutely blowing me away.
I am reading a book called The Better Angels of Our Nature, and it is about the fact that violence has decreased dramatically, and we are dramatically less violent even than we were 50 years ago. I can't put it down. The writing is just tremendous in it, but it's looking at the trends historically from the dawn of humanity to now. And how are you relating that, Gail? Tell me what you're.
Oh my God! I just had this picture of what it would be like to have this critical mass, the tipping point, whatever you want to call it, of individuals who once upon a time ran around as experts showing people what to do, no longer needing to do that because there was such a level of conscious development of vulnerability and humility that we are all each other's coaches, we are all each other's supports, that that things have grown to the point where we are living in a world where people simply support one another.
Right.
Suddenly I could see that picture so clearly.
Yay. Yeah,
Wow.
and as I noted in a note to the board this morning, and Justin used the word fractal several times in the last board meeting, used it here again, is that truth is truth. And so what is true in a expert versus is shared expertise is true in parenting, is true in the way we are a boss, is true in everything else. That being in relationship is being in relationship, and it doesn't really matter what the relationship is. And so I think that part of what that, again, makes possible in our relationship, our engagement relationship with the fellows, is modeling that. Is that you're not different when you're on the listserv, for example, than you are in a consulting engagement. So something that I've experienced often on the listserv is I will ask a question. I'll say, I'm looking for help with X, and I will get 10 answers that are all advice.
Mm-hmm.
I'll get 10 answers of you should do this, and you should do that, and you should do this, and you should do that, and I'm like, okay, am I the only one that you don't ask questions of? Am I the only one that, and so again, it's seeing that what we are is what we are, and how we be in relationship is how we practice being in relationship, and I love that, Gail.
Oh, huge.
Okay, well, we are 10 minutes from close here, and what we have done in terms of looking at the fellows, at just engagement of this one group, is we have really answered the question, what do we want to accomplish by engaging the fellows? We can vary, and we've also talked about, in large part, what it'll take. It will take engaging people, meeting people where they are with what they're ready for in terms of engagement. And that, to me, is the biggest piece. It will be creating the environment where people feel comfortable engaging at whatever way they feel comfortable engaging. Whether that is with vulnerability, or whether that is just with whatever whatever along the continuum of vulnerability. I mean, if we just continue to realize that there's a continuum of everything, that you're not vulnerable or not vulnerable, you're just someplace along a continuum of vulnerability. That you're someplace along a continuum of wanting to be engaged with this particular group. You're someplace along a continuum of wanting to explore more and practice more. And that's the conditions that are coming up for me here, that there is definitely a need for supports from right now, creating a future for that. What that makes possible for us is the catalyst for everything that we're talking about. The ability as an organization to nurture the assets that are our fellows, and to model that it's not the God bless Lisa Humanek, use and utilize our fellows.
Mm-hmm.
How do we use and utilize the asset that is our fellows? Somebody, UPS wants in. Somehow every truck that delivers something wants in today.
Can I add something to what I think we're trying to achieve?
Please.
We're not trying to make the organization last. We've all agreed on that. But I'd like to see us plan for the community to last, even if the faces in it keep changing. That there would be a need for this community to keep finding each other, sharing experiences, laughing together, telling our awesomes, long after the organization has said, you don't need us anymore. I think that could make a difference to how we plan if we keep that in mind.
Beautifully said,
loose
Jane.
starfish will still have rolling legs.
Yeah,
Even
yeah.
if there is even if the central hub as we know it now has disappeared. Because it didn't need to keep existing.
Yeah, it's beautiful, Jane. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that there's also a sense that I'm getting as we're talking about this now, that we see a community of fellows, but I think that there are many communities of our fellows. That if we see it in that way, and you guys have talked a lot about that, is it geographic, is it what people feel comfortable with, is it small group phone conversations, is it whatever, that it's not monolithic. And so, you know, how do we engage our fellows? How, maybe a different question being how, because when we get into the how do we, what processes do we use so that our fellows feel engaged at a level that brings out the best in them? Because then it's about how they feel engaged rather than how we engage them, which generally has the so they'll do X. So we can use and utilize them.
Well, maybe this is utilized, but it's by others, not by us. Because one of the things I'm thinking is that we feel our most engaged often when we are mentoring someone who is vulnerable in some area that perhaps we're better at, just as we're vulnerable in some other area that they're better at. We have never asked people to say who is willing to be a mentor and in what. To say, hey, yeah, I'm available if anybody wants to make a private call on this. Get in touch. Sure, I'd love to connect and just have a chat on this if somebody needs that. That many of those fellows who maybe don't feel they have a lot to contribute on the list would be willing to contribute an ear, a friendly face, just one person to talk to.
We had a really interesting conversation. It was the first lunch that we've had together as the three of us. Candace had been in another conversation with me with the folks in Westmoreland County, which was the start of our whole Pennsylvania adventure, and talking about how Jim and Susan were supporting each other in their work. And Candace was mentioning how positive it was listening on the phone conversation to have people who basically could be there to support each other. And the idea that came out of just that lunchtime conversation is stepping out of immersion. Wouldn't it be wonderful if you stepped in? That Jane, when you step out of immersion, Gail is there to be your mentor, and you guys are buddied up from the start. Justin, the minute you step out, Stacy is there to step. I mean, it just seemed so natural and brilliant. We talk so often about the need at board tables to have mentors, buddies. It just seemed beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, I know it's meant a lot to me that Kevin has sometimes been there to talk. Nancy has sometimes been there to talk. Why Gail and I don't see each other more often, I simply can't imagine every time we connect. How much I enjoy your company, but life keeps happening, and we'll do that soon because it's summer. So it might not last the particular batching up, but it would get things started.
Right.
I'm loving it. Okay, so next time we will be talking about how what I am going to ask of you guys is that we, if it is possible that we can meet every couple of weeks to hammer this out rather than monthly, that would be fabulous. I know that I couldn't be here just because I was out of town. But if we can find a time every couple of weeks, is that something that you guys want to do now? Do you have your calendar? I know Annette doesn't have her calendar, but is that something that you guys have your calendars for?
We can do it quickly.
If someone could just shoot me an email or a text with the date, that would be great. I likely will not remember.
How is July 9th for you guys? Yeah, let's not. How is July 7th and 8th for you guys? We're waiting to nail down one other meeting, and if July 7th or 8th works for you guys.
Depends what Gail's birthday plans are.
That's true.
Well, I've already got my email protected.
I will be traveling back the 9th and 10th. So after that, even the 11th would be better for me. But it's also, I can also, join in the same way I'm doing now, of course.
Does the 11th work for the rest of you guys?
Perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
That's a Friday, right?
Friday.
I'm just double checking.
Friday the 11th.
The 11th is a. Okay,
yes,
very
it is
good.
a Friday.
Yes, ma'am, it is. I have got a commitment for about an hour and a half at 11 Pacific, 2 Eastern. After that would be preferable, although we could do it beforehand. So we could do it 9, or we could do it 9/noon, or we could do it 1:30/4:30.
I vote for 9/noon.
Me too.
Yeah, especially on Friday.
That's fine with me.
Stacy, is that good with you?
I was just going to say, Stacy has to be in there.
Yeah.
I didn't get to see her answer. Is she good?
She smiled, but
I
think you're muted, Stacy.
Okay, yeah, you're muted for whatever reason. So if you want to unmute your mic. Okay, so if you'll put in the calendar, or you'll put in the calendar, 9 a.m. On Friday the 11th, noon Eastern time. God knows what Central time.
Okay.
And we will email you, Annette, to make sure that you get that.
Thank you.
Can I make one other suggestion, Hildy? I suspect that there will be a blog post coming out of this, but I don't want to presume that. But I would love it if we could figure out a way to ask the Fellows community to have a look at this meeting and watch the video or listen to the podcast or whatever it is they do, and tell us if we've missed anything.
Oh, good idea.
Go for it.
I wouldn't want to.
I will tell you, I'm not even going to type up the notes of this, and I'm not going to put it out on the. Candace may blog it. I gotta go bury my head.
Yeah.
Good point.
Okay, 9 a.m. here on the 11th.
Yep. Yes, sorry, Bob.
So does anybody want to put that word out at the listserv to ask people if they would do this?
Go for it, Gail.
Yeah, that's where I am.
Okay.
He who volunteers is lost.
Yep.
I have a great idea somebody else should do.
Well, the volunteers take one step forward and everybody steps back.
That's why you don't give advice. You ask a question and get someone else to answer it.
Ask a question. Yes. Will you do it?
No. Okay.
No. What is standing out for you guys as we're wrapping up at the top of the hour? What stood out for you from this meeting?
I'm thrilled that we focused more of our time on what it would do for the Fellows than what it might do for the organization or the mission. That's important, but we have the right message, I think. The focus is on why they'd want to be part of it, why they'd want to get re-engaged more actively engaged.
I'm just really excited to be here and feel like I'm getting a deeper understanding of what you're trying to accomplish, and I'm very, very excited about it.
Yay.
My reflection is the fact that I'm so grateful that both you, Annette, and Stacy have been not only participating with this and interested, but your contributions have been so helpful, so generative for us to be thinking. It feels to me like you're fellows already, and that I don't mean that to sound so cliquish and insider-like, but it's just neat to see that there's so many overlaps, so much synergy, so many, the idea whose time has come.
Oh, very much so, and I've been excited about. I feel like I've found my people, to be honest. When I was talking to Dimitri the other day, I was like, oh, finally I found people who think exactly like I do. And it's wonderful.
I was going to say welcome to the club, but I think I'll use cult. No, I mean club.
the first cult I've ever wanted to join.
Yeah.
The younger people say, I found my peeps.
There we go. What's popping
there
for
you go.
Stacey? What is popping for you, Stacy?
Those concepts of the values of humility and vulnerability. So how you can build community engagement around, and community networks and groups, starting with those as expressed values, and what's possible when you start with that. It's really interesting thinking about where you can go with that.
Yeah, great. Yeah, and I love the framing of it. One of the many things that stands out for me and stood out in the last meeting is you have an amazing ability to reframe and to put things into language that is just really, really powerful. So I'm really grateful you're here. Justin, Nancy, what's going on in your brains?
I had just written down a wealth of opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Every piece of the discussion we had today was about creating opportunity for the fellows and for creating the future, mm-hmm. and beyond. So it's all very exciting.
Yeah. I'm writing that at the top of my page.
I think what's going on in my head a lot is it's the pathways question of mm-hmm. what's bringing people to the space, what expectations we would want of people who come in the space, and I think being intentional about that, being thoughtful about, hey, there is actually, not being prescriptive, but saying, that expectation of inquiry and of rippleness, since I can't think of anything else, that there's there's a necessity in establishing that for this to work.
Mm-hmm.
And particularly as we think about where fellows are and how they have and have not engaged. And because, we talk, I think, just to Nancy's point, all the talk about opportunity, and as I am sometimes want to do, a tremendous amount of opportunity has already been created but hasn't been taken advantage of. And so
mm-hmm. Yeah.
What are the conditions going on there that could shift to highlight that opportunity, create the pathways.
Mm-hmm.
I'll throw some more jargon in. And
Can we have some acronyms too?
Yeah, and be sure to put TM after it. So.
Oh man, yeah. What's standing out for you?
I think what's standing out for me is just the fact that the conversation we had today was just being so conscious of, if the space is created, what does that mean? Just be really attentive to the people that will ultimately be a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
Oh, it does. Definitely does. And you?
Been reflecting on the continuum in the context of the organization, because we were talking about that the organization isn't necessary at one point in its continuum. So I guess what I'm thinking about is the continuum of the organization. What does that mean? Mm-hmm. And I was struck in thinking about what Annette was talking when she was talking about the youngest fellows and their reactions, and they are fortunate to be in an organization that they're automatically supported. The language is automatically being used just by circumstance. I mean, it doesn't have to be like that. But I'm just sort of thinking about it, and I think Justin, you were talking about other people within organizations who are, taught to fish, I guess, for a placeholder. And thinking about it again in the context of this organization, and also reflecting on going back to the first immersion class and thinking about how naive we were in many ways about what that meant. Now, the values were there, the principles were there. I mean, you know, that underlying foundation was there, but in looking at where it's going, so I'm just sort of reflecting on all of that and what that can mean in the future as the organization moves through its own.
So I'd like to actually share a reflection on that, and I think also, Jane, you had talked about preserving the community. I always get a little uncomfortable when people say our goal is to not be here. You know, you hear that a lot from nonprofits who say, you know, our vision
Put themselves out of business.
Yeah, and that is the wrong perspective. That's a needs perspective as opposed to a community perspective, in my opinion. That the community will always need intentionality. And so those who are filling a space of creating intentionality, of building stronger, you know, more community benefit in their existence, that there will always be a need for that. Communities don't just happen by accident. And I think it speaks to what Jane was saying. And so I think being, you know, in terms of that continuum question that you raised, Dimitri, is keeping that question open and aware, and what pressure is that putting on us in our thinking that we might want to be cautious about. And I really like what you said, Jane, about if the if the organization may be gone, but somehow the community has to stay.
Yeah, the thing that's really popping for me in this conversation right here is so related to the conversation that Gail and I just came out of with the folks at Pano, talking about that ongoing relationship. One of the exciting things about our working initially with the Pennsylvania Association of Nonprofit Organizations is that you do enough work with enough groups who are already on the ground, and there's already support networks out there. The problem with many of the support networks is they are, with the best of intentions, providing education and support in ways that actually are detrimental to building relationship. And so if you just infuse frameworks and processes and values into the work of people who are already doing work, then as an organization we may get to go away. It's not the goal that we go away, it's the goal that this is so ubiquitous a way of being that there are communities around being it. And you're right, it does take support, Justin, and the thing that I keep flashing on is for how many hundreds of years has there been a Chamber of Commerce? You know, there's support systems so that business people can support each other. You know, having an equal, and I even say it at the end of Pollyanna, I would love to see systems for supporting communities and being community in every community.
Yeah.
So maybe a way to get both, to merge both of those perspectives is not so much that creating the future will go away, it's that it'll become noticing the future. So you don't have to make it anymore, it's already there, but there's always going to be a need to go, hey, that's happening, everybody notice it.
As usual, the best part of the meeting is the last minutes, but I have to run, sorry.
Me as well. Thank you guys so much, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
I want my chamber of community.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks for being.
Hey, Justin, can you hold on for just 1 second?
Yeah.
Okay. Bye, guys. Good to see you.